about love here, and I want to talk about like brotherly love, talking about black men, platonic friendships, romantic relationships, familiar relationships. How are we being intentional about cultivating love and relationships with other black men? I feel like patriarchy makes it hard because straight cisgender men, we're not kind to our queer brothers, putting that lightly. So we make that conversation, we make those moments hard to bridge that gap. So I'm curious in terms of brotherly love across gender relations or sexual orientation lines, is that important for y'all? Like how do y'all, like on some real shit, like is that important to have loving relationships across all types of sexual orientation lines? Like what does that look like in terms of just having those loving relationships?
Yeah.
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 We say yeah, but in theory and practice is different.
No, you're right.
Yeah, what does it mean for you?
Because you say lightly, I would argue that lightly is heavily.
Of course. Yeah, putting it lightly. Yeah.
But as I am experiencing, the more I learn about the different sexual orientations in other black men and how it exists in their daily walk and how they overcome those things. Not that it's my role or not that it was your role to do so, but I am so fucking impressed. And that impressed comes from such a deep well of ignorance. When we were 12, 13 years old, certain activities were deemed homosexual or gay. And because you were trying to follow the crowd, you participated, well, not you, I participated in those same activities of differentiating myself away from gay men or queer men or trans men, et cetera. But the more that I grow and the more that I unlearn that particular thing and then learn about the perspective and the experience of queer black men, it's just like, I just want to hang with y'all. I want to see what y'all talking about. I want to see how y'all handle experiences, how you handle like just walking into a room. Because as a cultural analyst myself, and I'm just looking at how black people deal with overcoming oppression, when I find out the more nuances that come within a subsection of people who look just like me, I want to know. And I feel so stupid. I mean, it's kind of unfair to hold a 12-year-old self to that much honor of a 32-year-old person right now. But I feel so stupid looking at that 12-year-old being like, why didn't you stop loving the rainbow because you thought it was gay? Man, the rainbow was still dope. Actually, it's more dope when you realize that it became the gay flag, then the LGBTQ flag through all this wonderful history that you didn't know about, but you differentiated yourself 20 years ago. Yeah. So like, I think it's important to build that bridge, because the more that I know, the more experience, the more we can, as a race, as a people, reach liberation together.
And I asked the question because I'm just like, just from an honest, like, strip all this shit down, I'm curious, like, do queer men actually want friendships with straight men, just based on how trash niggas can be? Like, is that
facts?
Like, just from a reality, because I know for me, I definitely want, but I'm just like, just the way that like masculinity and all this shit shows up, like, is that something that like queer brothers think about, like building those bonds, or just like, niggas is over here, we not, until niggas get their shit together, we not fucking with, you know.
I think so much of what happens as a queer person in interacting and being in community with and living with cishet men is the idea that this emotional labor, this intellectual labor, the spiritual labor isn't new to us. Mm-hmm. We've been doing this our whole life around like what that looks like. We've been negotiating this our whole life. And so for me, as much as I love to hear someone say like, I look and I marvel, right? Or I look and it's like, how did y'all do that, right? Look at the comeuppance, look at the, right? I'm also like, but this person, myself, is worthy and deserving of love. I'm worthy and deserving of friendship outside of the ways that I perform what my sexual orientation looks like, outside of the ways that I perform what masculinity means to me. You know what I mean? And so I think if I want to have friendship with cishet men, that friendship has to be contingent on its safety for me, that I feel safe to be the fullness of who I am in that room. Right? Without someone questioning and things like that, or also feeling like I have to be the educator to make someone better understand the ways that they've come to be socialized. Right. Because at the end of the day, then it becomes more work for me, and I don't feel safe if I'm doing the work consistently. Because then who's pouring back into my cup? If I keep pouring back out, trying to explain the way of the world to you, then who's pouring back into me?
Because like we talk about, like there's always, you could look on any like black man page on Instagram and it's like Brotherhood, but it's like, are we as straight cisgender niggas inviting our queer brothers into the space, or are we just saying brotherhood as a blanket statement, but not like actually saying we want all black men to be here at this table? And I think that's the thing that we see in these recent social media times of like, black men gotta stand up. And it's like, are we actually being inclusive of everybody or just the straight niggas? I'm just
It
like,
doesn't feel inclusive. I don't have a coming out story. I never questioned my sexuality. I always knew that I was attracted to men from whatever moment that happens, 4, 5, I don't know. Right. So it was never something that I had to work through. So that was always my part of who I was. And all of my friends throughout my life pretty much were straight men. And I also was never made to feel like I was a spectacle or I was a person that had to educate, because they never looked at me like that, because I'm just the same person they always knew. I just happened to go on dates with other men instead of women. And as I got older, I did not like that experience of having to educate people, women more so than men, because I've actually had women tell me, oh, I thought you were gonna be like my little, I guess.
Your gay best friend.
Right,
Yeah.
and like I'm not looking for a hag or like I'm not that guy. Like I'm not gonna do your hair, I'm not gonna take you shopping. I'm a regular person just like any other man that you would encounter. So I shouldn't have to be put in that position of like teaching people, because I don't have anything to teach you. I don't, because I mean I live my life just like you do. Like if we have interest in baseball, if you have interest in baseball, I have interest in it. Like we connect on whatever we connect with. Well, what I do in the bed doesn't make who I am in the world at large.
yeah. And I mean, it's tough because everybody's perspective and experience is their perspective and experience. And I think when we talk about like brotherhood across, sexual orientation lines, I think homophobia takes us out of like the softness and tenderness we can have with each other. Like there's so much depth to us as black people in general, like, but as black men, there's so much depth that we can have with each other. And I my personal note, God damn, man, I'm sorry, I'm messing up the mic. Hands are moving, but like there's so much depth that I feel like we, because of homophobia, don't allow ourselves to get with each other. Like the silence, letting that shit breathe sometimes, knowing that it's okay to have an intimate moment with another man. To me, that's what, talk about brotherly love, that's what all that encapsulates. And from a personal note, I know I want to continue to build more of that into my life. Because I just feel like there's so much more we could be, in terms of like loving each other, because we could love each other so much more.
I think one thing that I find to be beautiful about the way that and the way that I see other queer people exist in the world is the way that our friendships and community work. I think for a lot of people, a lot of queer folks, we have created communities that were safe places in part because the families maybe that we came from weren't safe. The systems and institutions that we came in, whether school or church or social stuff, weren't safe, right? So there's this idea that we get to now exist and have these really beautiful, full, whole friendships with other men, right? That maybe cis-het folks have never experienced. Right, so it's like I remember the days where I would go and hang out with my friend Lou and his partner and sit kind of on the couch, and I was just like working through some stuff, and they just made like the space safe, and I was able to talk about stuff, and it wasn't like we're gonna do therapy now, but it was like there was such a freedom in the room for me to express what I was feeling and what I needed, right? And I felt like that was coming back to me in a way that maybe when I've interacted with cis-het men that it wasn't, right? It was kind of like, how do I, because it's like, I don't want you to think because I share something I'm hitting on you, you know what I mean? So there's ways that like queer folks, we move in the world that's really beautiful, and I think that there's so much that can be gained by the experience of seeing fully what queer folks and gender non-conforming and non-binary people bring to the table, right? I think Lena Waithe said, like, we are magic, and in a way, not only are we magic, but we've always been that, and we just didn't know it, And so I invite cis-het folks to experience that magic, right? But also not just to experience that magic, but to also experience what it means to take some of that privilege you have and use it so that my life is easier for my benefit,
To that point, when I'm hanging out with my homies and the conversation of queer black men comes up, most of my homies will say something to the tune like, I don't give a fuck. I don't care, you can be gay, et cetera, et cetera. But you're speaking to a point, Nick, I think that is more about intentional safety, not just neutral. Because where we are in the neutral space is actually very damaging to the people that we're trying to outreach. So when my friends are like, oh, I don't give a fuck, you gay, I don't give a fuck.
No, I need you to
you're
give a
trans.
fuck.
I need you to give a fuck, and I need you to create a space that says, I give a fuck.
Yes.
So then we can start there and move forward.
Yes.
And like naming that shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, naming it. One thing though, Nick, you mentioned I want to get back to, and ask BeMo this, you talked about being able to have those friendships with your queer friends who are men. There is maybe less of that performance there. Could still be there, but to a lesser degree, because you know, if y'all are both queer, both gay, we don't have to worry about one of us being gay because we know what it is. I think that it sparked an idea in my mind of how, like, as a black boy, I remember those moments of like stillness and vulnerability with my other black boyfriends growing up. Like just the homies, like we could, before all that patriarchy shit was forced on us, there was a moment, a couple of years where it was like, you could hold hands with your a baby cousin, whatever the case may be, before it got to the point where like, oh no, I ain't holding this nigga hand. And I guess I'm thinking like, if we're talking about straight dudes, how do we get back to that? Where it's cool to be super, super close. We don't have to worry about how close we are. Because I think that was an element, at least for me, I remember that growing up. And then junior high, high school, it was no more. College, forget about it. But there were like some years where it was like, there was a little bit more closeness just because you're a boy and you're a kid. I don't know, for me, it's important to remember that and honor that, because like it felt good, it felt safe. And it's like, how do we get back to that?
I just do it.
I
just do it. Like I like no, it's not. You know, you keep saying that. You said that this whole podcast, you keep talking about things are hard, things are not that easy. It's really easy for me.
Okay.
It's really easy for me to walk into my man's house and be like, yo, I'm feeling this way. The lady driving me crazy. I think I want to get married tomorrow, et cetera, et cetera. And then look at him and be like, how do you feel?
Yeah.
And so initially, as niggas do, they'll play you, man, get that weak, soft, old, moist ass, but keep coming back. Keep coming back.
Moist.
And eventually, it's the moist. Yeah, it's the moist that got me. It's the moist that got me. Man, go ahead, man. But eventually, like, so we are friends. I talk to you 3 times a week. Yeah. Eventually, your behavior is going to model mine. Yeah. And so now we in the house, and I don't even gotta say something, man, I'm taking this girl serious, bro. Yeah. I'm thinking about this, I feel this way, et cetera, et cetera. And then also with like, so we've gotten to the conversation point. Now I'm intentional about sitting close to niggas now. So now like if there's a park bench and it seems like there's 2 sections, no, I'm sitting in the same sections with you and be like, let's talk. That's me though, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. That's me. Sorry, I touched the mic, but that's me. I feel like it's not difficult if you just do it. And especially there's a men's group, we call ourselves On the Precipice of a New Nigga, in which we are constantly trying to break these things down.
What does that new nigga look like?
We don't know. We on the precipice. We trying to find out. We don't know. We don't know. But I think it starts with sitting close to your mans, expressing yourself and being vulnerable, being emotional. All that moist shit we talked about like in college and like, I mean, we used to call it gay, you know, honestly. But gay and moist, all the other shit, like all that emotional shit that was right? I mean, it is. That's what it was. That was our word. That's what it was.
So, but you mentioned like, with your friend you mentioned, like, once you are able to create that space, he might play you in the beginning because that's just like some formality shit. Exactly. But once
that's still protecting the masculinity.
Right. Still protecting it.
It's protecting the
But once you let it sit for a good 20 minutes, then you're like, oh, he starts opening up. And sometimes it just takes us sitting in those moments a little bit longer. You know, maybe instead of going to the next song, you just ride in silence with your man for a minute. That shit could be awkward. That shit could be a little awkward for a second, but once you sit in it for a second, you're like, oh, okay, this is okay. We don't have to have something playing in the background every time. We don't have to force the conversation. We could just be here and be still together and just enjoy that moment, or even just exist in that moment. That to me is a part of like brotherly love. Like we don't have to always fill the space and perform with some shit. We could just sit there, be, and when the conversation sparks, then it'll spark back up.
I think one of the ways that patriarchy continues to manifest and exist is the fact that most times that men, or at least cis men, will only talk shop with their boys, right? And we realize, especially when you look at research, that a lot of times that once men leave college, that the amount of friendships they have continues to lessen over time dramatically, right? Yes. And so there's this thing about when men turn 50 that they generally only have 1 to 2 friends, in part because men are not cultivating meaningful, deep, intentional relationships with other men. But what I find though is that a lot of times we then say, well, I don't need a best friend because I got my girl, I got my wife. And then we don't realize the ways that we're intentionally making women do emotional work that's not necessarily theirs, right? That like, I don't need to go see a therapist because I'm gonna talk to my wife about it. And so she's holding all this emotional weight from you that she can't give back to you because you don't have the sense of depth to be able to hold that. But also like, because that's happening, we're also not intentionally setting real honest friendships with other men, other male socialized folk. And so I just think that that's something that I think a part of divesting from patriarchy in the way of love and relationships is like, how can I intentionally build deeper level of friendship with my boy without feeling the challenge of like, if I say this, he's gonna think I'm gay, or he's gonna think I'm hitting on him, or he's gonna think whatever, you know what I mean? And I think that that's one of the ways that we divest, is that we think about like, what could it look like to have a friendship, not just a boy, not just a coworker, but like an actual friendship.
Now, I say it's to contradict my own point. I say it's easy, but I've lost friends. You know what I mean? I've lost friends. Friends, it's actually loose. Maybe I've lost coworkers. Maybe I've lost shop buddies. Because when it comes to the point, I was like, okay, we talked about what my 15, 16-hour workday looks like. Let's talk about a relationship with your fiance. Let's talk about a relationship with my girl. Let's talk about a relationship with your dad. Nah, I don't want to do all that.
Right.
All right, okay, cool. Next time, let's talk about it. I don't want to do all that. Next time, all right, B, you actually get on my nerves. I don't want you to come to my house no more.
Well, damn. We talked about this vulnerability bag. He was like, if your vulnerability bag ain't deep as
Why
mine,
are you here? What is the reason? Why are you here?
So that's cool, like on the surface level, but like when someone has violated me and I express that to you and your response is, I don't want to talk about that. You know, hold space for me. Why am I here? Why am I in your living room? I'm talking about my 15, 16-hour workday, expressing my love through that, and you can't hold space to me when I'm actually talking about something that's really bothering me. And I don't want to take this to my girl, I want to take this to my mom, I want to take this to you. I'm working on the therapy, but I'm taking this to you right now.
And I think something that you said hits in the sense of like holding space. And I think about, to your point, Jeremy, about like, what does love look like? And I think that as folks at this table, I think that one of the things that we have to do for work is to ask ourselves, in each relationship, in each partnership, what does love look like for me from this person? And not just what does it look like, but what does it feel like? What does it smell like? What does it taste like? Like, can we envision a world in which we show up in the relationships and we are asking for what we need, and then we're able to maybe, also do the other work of reciprocating for that person what they need? So it's not loving somebody the way that we need, it's loving somebody the way that they need to be loved.
Because like to your point, sometimes I don't want to talk to this about with my partner. Right. I need my homie's perspective on this. And I think sometimes we could be so feeling the lack of that with our homie that we just pour onto our lady all this stuff when it's like, we know that this stuff we could take to a friend, but if we don't have that space, then it's just like our girlfriend or the wall. Right. And it's like, there's so much opportunity with our male friendships, with our people who are in community with us, to pour in, and if we kind of give that a chance. And to your point, like, you was in the book club, that Joseph Beam quote, like, if we can depend on each other, so much of our maybe resentment that we have towards Black women when they don't feel like listening to us.
Right.
If we can pour into each other, that kind of frustration or that whatever we are feeling or tension that we may have collectively toward Black women, will be less because we can pour into each other. So it's a little bit more equal overall. And I think you alluded to it perfectly. For folks in the book club, Joseph Beam was talking about that. If you're in a book club, you would know, but we'll be back soon.
And also, again, I think this is an invitation, as I spoke earlier about, for cishet men to look at the ways that queer men exist in the world. Because I think so much of the pouring into each other and the reciprocation pool is a lot of ways that queer friendships work. Is that like, yo, today is my shit, and you're gonna listen, and you're gonna pour in, and you're gonna, and then tomorrow or later on, it's gonna be yours. And we're able to do that. And I think for me, when my social circle changed, and like, I stopped maybe centering whiteness in my social circles, and I stopped centering straightness in my social circles, and love people who were willing to love me. The way that I showed up changed, but what I expected changed from friendships, but also what I received changed, which changed me,
So we've talked a lot about vulnerability at the top, self-love a little bit in the middle, brotherly love at the end. If we were to like end on a note of, rethinking what this idea of black boyhood, black manhood looks like, and kind of start with the sentence, if love is a requirement for black men, tomorrow I will do what? Like if we were to put that onus on us and rethink how we embody ourselves, how do you want to live tomorrow? Like if love was a requirement, let's say you can't leave the door until you put love as a requirement in your life.
Wow.
How do you want to live? I know for me, I'll start. I'll give y'all some time to think about it.
Appreciate it.
You can breathe a little bit, drink it, you know. You get called on that work or something like, I'm gonna just drink my drink real quick. So like, I know for me, I want to embody a love practice that is more open. I can be to myself sometimes, I can be in my introvert bubble, but I wanna be a little bit more open with inviting love in, but also showcasing love to people in my life. I think I can kind of do it through acts of service. I love to cook, but I want to be able to.
Yo, your Instagram food.
Hey, you know, I be trying.
Have you seen that food?
Yes, delicious.
And then you be dropping it like it's not a big deal. Like, nigga, you done put 27 ingredients together for a sauce. Have you seen this shit?
Hey, you know.
What the shit's on there? I got you.
That's
It's pretty and it looks good.
that's the way that I show love to my family. You know, getting blessings from the ancestors. High on the hog, whatever.
Anyway, sorry, I just had to say that food be looking good.
I appreciate you. That's love right there.
Yeah.
Boom.
Putting it in practice. I like that. But I think being more open to receiving love, because for me, sometimes receiving love is a little bit like, wait, this is unfamiliar. Yeah. And especially if you talk about brotherly love, if a black woman showing me love, I see you, black man, da-da-da-da. I'm like, thank you, sister. But when the black man shows me love that's not my father or like a family, then I'm like, where's this coming from? Like, why do I feel resistant? Why do I feel resistant to it? So I want to be more open to receiving it, but also telling it, being vocal about it. So I know for me, if I were to put love as a requirement for myself, it would look like, being more open to receiving it and also, being vocal about it. So I'm curious, like, how is it, if you were to make love a requirement for you, what does that look like?
I think for me, it's really about, I've always known how to receive love. Like that's always been easy for me. I didn't know how to give it. So for me, starting every day and figuring out how I'm going to give love and show love to someone or something, even if it's a stranger on the street, smiling, speaking, having a random conversation, and just opening love up in a space, just into the universe, putting it out there to share it and kind of raise vibrations for everything. That makes sense? Yeah.
I think as a dad of two black sons, I think about the way of how harsh the world is, right? And as just being a black person, we know like the complexities of what it looks like to breathe, move, and live in this world. And so one of the ways that I center love in my house and have been doing every single day, at least for the past 5 years, is giving them these affirmations of who they are. And in part, I do that because I think, again, with the cruelty of the world, that there's gonna be so many moments in which the world tells my sons something about themselves that they're not. And a part of me being their dad is teaching them that the world is gonna give you this, and if this doesn't match what we told you are, then we're gonna reject it. Right. So part of that is like, I'm handsome, and I'm smart, and I'm strong, and I'm brave, and I'm worthy, and I'm always enough, and I'm powerful. We've been doing that every day. And my goal for that is that when my son gets to high school, my oldest son's in middle school now, right? And people tease him about something. It's like, we have to, actually, the other day, we went to a movie, and things got crazy. This person like called me some racial names, blah, 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 blah. And we got in the car and my kids were upset about it. It was this whole racist moment in Texas. And I said, this white man called me the N-word, right? Like ER, like real word, right? Damn. And so we get in the car and I said, my sons are upset. And I'm trying to, in this moment, like, I moved how I thought out the way because I want to center them. And so I'm like, what he said, that word he said about us, did he say that we're handsome? They're like, no. Like, did he say we were smart? So we went through all the words. I'm like, well, then that's not, what he said about us is not who we are. Right. And so for me, I think the biggest way that I demonstrate love is that the kids, the people who are watching, my sons, my offspring, know what that is, so that that's the expectation of how they move in the world for themselves. And as they, what I teach my sons will teach their sons and their daughters and so forth. So that to me is what love looks like, is making sure the next group of people who inhabit this earth know what that is.
Everybody's looking,
Damn.
It's tough, man. It's tough.
I think it's a level, I think what needs to happen with me is a level of consistency and communication. So spend all this time working, you spend all this time self-loving, but I've spent very little time expressing and communicating my love. And then often I even get annoyed sometimes, if I'm being honest about it, about people asking me to reaffirm the love for them. And so what I'm going through now is just being, my nigga, you can do all these things every day for other people, but you can't tell your lady you love her before you leave the door? Why is that hard for you? Why is that a stretch? So breaking that down and then just being more communicative. So it's very interesting that you say that before you leave this house, you gotta show love, because that's what the lady is forcing me to do. The intimacy exercise I'm doing with my homeboys, she's doing with me before I leave the house. You ain't show me no love before you left. You ain't kissed me before you left. What's up? Okay, my bad. Let's get into the norm and get into the
And you didn't
practice
show
of it.
me love. It's not a matter of saying I love you. It's
Right.
that I didn't. There wasn't an action. Love wasn't a verb.
Right.
Before you left the house.
Right.
Yes.
You about to leave? Where you going?
Yeah.
Right.
I love that.
Right. That's where I am.
And I think it's like, again, with patriarchy, it tells us to do things. It tells us to like do these actions. It doesn't really tell us to just be. It doesn't really instruct us to love. So if we're able to replace the performance, replace the posturing with connection, with empathy, with openness, with I love yous, I love y'all niggas, all y'all in this room.
Shot the whole room up.
Shot the whole room up. With love. Like,
With love.
Come on, intentionality.